I've been grinding so much of the new Salvation's Edge raid. I've done tons of full completions, master clears, grinded adept weapons, done challenges. I really do find this raid to be extremely enjoyable, more so than any other raid in Destiny 2 history for me personally. And just this week I finally got the Euphony raid exotic linear fusion rifle to drop for me, and I've been playing around with it a lot since then, trying to dial in like, what does it do well, what does it not do well? How do I maximize its potential? And in this video, I'm going to break all of that down for you so that you know whether or not you should be farming for this thing and what you can do with it once you get your hands on it. Because let's be honest, it's a raid exotic. We sort of have these really high expectations for raid exotics. You think about things like the Vex Mythoclast and the things that it's done in recent history, especially when you have artifact mods that interact with it well. You think of things like the Terrabo, which dominated a certain season of the Crucible where it was like the pinnacle of pinnacle things to use. You think of things like the Necrochasm, which even right now with the One for Thrall, catalyst on it, it's just doing insane things. You've got the Anarchy exotic grenade launcher. Remember how many years that dominated stuff in the PvE meta? Like, we've got pretty high expectations for raid exotics, and I want to talk about this one, and I really want to convince you guys, hopefully today, that this one can stand toe-to-toe with those other raid exotics. It deserves its same sort of place on your shelf. So let's get cranking. So let's get the basics out of the way first. The Euphony, it's a strand linear fusion rifle, but it's a first of its kind because it's a 3-round burst, but it's a special weapon, not a heavy weapon, right? So this baby is going in your kinetic slot. One of my favorite things about the gun is actually the way it looks. Like, the design here is so freaking clean. The sights on it, they're literally it's the witness's arm stretched out with their hand holding the optic up for us to look through it. Like, how freaking awesome is that? Aesthetically, this weapon is exceptional. It looks like something that you would find in a vampire lord's armory. I love it. But you want to know, right, what does the exotic do? So I hear so many people talk about this thing and totally misunderstand what it does. They think it's a linear fusion with hatchling. And they think that it's lame because that's not a lot going on. But it's not that, it's so much more than that. If hatchling is Charmander, the exotic perk on this thing is Charizard. It's the difference between a Magikarp and a Gyarados. They're related, but they are completely unalike. There are 2 exotic perks on the Euphony, the first of which is called Unwound. It reads, dealing sustained damage with this weapon spawns threadlings at your target's location. In PvE, this translates to every hit. Every hit spawns a threadling. So in your 3-round burst, every hit will create a threadling, meaning 3 threadlings will spawn and immediately damage the same target, or if you killed that target, then they'll fan out looking for more targets. Here's what's crazy about that. You're basically adding threadling damage on top of every single projectile you fire out of this thing against big targets and bosses. So if I'm in a raid and I shoot 1 time at the witness, I'll do my base damage 3 times in my 3-round burst. And I'll create 3 total threadlings that will immediately attack him as well. In this damage phase, I started out doing 23,195 damage because I had 1 strand surge on. That's it, 1 strand surge. So that's 23,195 damage per projectile. That's 69,585 damage per trigger pull, alongside 17,636 damage for every threadling that I create. So that's 3 threadlings per trigger pull, which is another 52,908 damage per trigger pull on top of the base damage. That means for just one pull of the trigger on this thing, I have just done 122,493 damage to the witness in 1 trigger pull. Now, I found that I could comfortably dump 21 shots with this thing into the witness for each damage phase, if I'm dodging his attacks appropriately and maximizing my time that I can be doing DPS. So at base alone, that means in 1 damage phase, with nothing but my special weapon, I could dish out 2.57 million damage. In order to 2-phase the witness, you need everybody sitting around 4 million total damage to the witness on your team. In 2 phases, at base damage alone, you can pump out about 5 million damage by yourself. You're above the curve, just using a special weapon here, no super, no heavy. Like, that's kind of crazy, guys. That is kind of crazy. You can be like on the top of your team for DPS against the Witness using nothing but a special weapon, and that's it. But there's another exotic perk on the Euphony that takes this even further. So the second perk is called Spindle, and it reads, Threadling damage increases this weapon's damage. So to be perfectly clear here, every single time a Threadling that you created damages anything at all, even if it's immune, you will get a stack of Spindle. Every stack of Spindle increases the Euphony's damage by 2%. It maxes out at 25 stacks. So if your math is pretty good here, 25 times 2, that means you're getting a maximum of 50% extra damage on the Euphony. So let's think about this for a minute. Let's say you step into a damage phase with 0 stacks. You unload your first shot into the boss. It spawned 3 Threadlings, which will immediately damage the boss to add to your total output. But now you've got 3 stacks of Spindle, so your next trigger pull will do 6% more damage on top of the Threadling damage you just did. You shoot your next shot. You gain 3 more stacks. Now your third shot will do 12% more damage. You go in for a fourth shot. Now you've got 9 stacks for 18% more damage. You're getting stronger and stronger with every pull of the trigger against that boss on top of the extra Threadling damage you're doing with every pull of the trigger. You're snowballing damage here like crazy. But let's say you want to start with more stacks than 0 when you go into the damage phase. That would be a smart thing to do, right? Start damage with extra stacks of Spindle ready to go. Let's say you've got the Swarmers on your Warlock, and you bring a Tangle with you into damage phase. You throw that Tangle, it spawns 2 Threadlings that immediately damage the boss. Then you throw a Threadling Grenade, which spawns 3 Threadlings that immediately damage the boss. Then you pop your Rift to spawn 3 more Threadlings at your feet, which go and damage the boss for 3 more stacks. That's 8 stacks going into damage phase for 16% more damage with the Euphony on your very first shot of DPS phase. Or maybe you throw a Needle Storm super at the boss, and you throw a Threadling Grenade. Now you've got at least 22% extra damage going into DPS. Heck, you could dump everything. You could have 5 perched Threadlings ready to go, throw a Tangle, throw a Grenade, throw your super, cast your Rift. Now you've got more than 20 stacks to start damage with. Not to mention all the damage that you just did with all of those abilities and all those Threadlings. Like, I don't think people understand just how much damage you can do at the ceiling with some good build crafting and execution here. You could be pumping out like 3 million damage easy in a single damage phase here. And that's not using a heavy weapon. Do you understand how wild that is? So we've talked about what this thing can do to a single big target, to a boss, but what about ad clearing? Well, in general, this thing makes very short work of trash mobs too, because there's Threadlings everywhere. It's spawning Threadlings every time you shoot stuff. Plus, you've got the fragment Thread of Rebirth, which is creating Threadlings on strand weapon kills, and you've got the fragment that increases your Threadling damage output. Plus, you've got Tangles popping up everywhere, and you're using the artifact mod Threaded Blast for big Tangle explosions, and I'm using the Swarmers, so those Tangles are also spawning more Threadlings as well. It's just green chaos, guys. Everything around you dying. Solo a room full of ads, no problem. The only challenge there is ammo economy, so I run double strand reserves with a strand scavenger and special finder, as well as a strand surge, so I'm getting and keeping more ammo and dishing out extra damage. It's that simple. But to be clear, while this thing clears ads like nobody's business, might I recommend that since it's so good at single target damage, maybe you run a machine gun or a heavy weapon in general that's just good at ad clearing. You're not going to be needing it for DPS, your heavy weapon I mean, so you may as well use it for something else. But let me make one more quick recommendation. You can also use the Apotheosis Veil to boost your Threadling grenade damage as well. So throw your grenade, cast your super, throw your boosted grenade right after. Now you've got a ton of Threadlings on the boss, and you can go right into shooting the Euphony immediately after that with a ton of stacks of Spindle. Not to mention, you just buffed your teammates on top of that. This thing is nutty, guys. Like, the sky is the limit here. I should note, however, that this weapon was made for PvE. It is a garbage PvP gun. Do not use it in PvP. It is so bad there. You're not going to get any kind of traction with it there unless you're like super lucky or the enemy team is super bad, so just don't bother. Anyway, that that is the review, guys. I can't wait to play around with this thing more in my raid clears to come and GMs and stuff. Like, I'm super pumped. Bungie knew what they were doing with this thing, and it shows. Best of luck to all of you raiders out there. I hope the game gives you the exotic drop sooner than later, and you don't have to wait too long. Thanks as always for watching the video today. Feel free to leave a comment or a like on the video, as that's the best way to support the content here on YouTube, and consider subscribing for additional Destiny content. Be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in, the Crucible, Pale Heart raids, I don't know, wherever. I hope I see you, because, being in contact with other human beings can sometimes be kind of cool. Okay, bye-bye.